How are you doing? It's good to talk to you again.
It's you know what, it's great. And just the prospect of getting out of my little box here. I seem to have lived in this box for the last 2 years in my little studio here, and the prospect of I'm going to Poland tomorrow. First of all, I'm doing a festival in Poland, and despite all the paperwork and the COVID stuff you have to go through, and all the stuff that's involved in going into Europe now with Brexit and whatever, it's still an exciting prospect to go up there and plug your guitar in and get behind a microphone. So yeah, the idea of coming out to the States again is just uberly exciting, which is great.
What can we expect from you when you're touring in the States? What will we hear?
Well, it's one man and his guitar again. It's one of those. I will figure it out when I get there. The good thing about doing the one man thing is that I can constantly just shake up the set list. I don't have to do the same thing. The last time I did this 2 years ago, I knew what the first song would be and what the last song was, and then I didn't know where it was in the middle. So because I was taking lots of questions from the audience and stuff, I mean, I'm not planning on doing that this time. Be more of a list of songs and a little bit of chat. But last time it was really, I felt like a gunslinger. If you're like walking on into the dead man's gulch and not knowing how you're going to come out. And it was a real interesting experience for me, because people asked some great questions and asked for some songs that I maybe hadn't played for a long time. So I think they were enjoying the look of absolute horror on my face as I was trying to remember the chords for specific songs. But it was great fun.
Yeah, speaking of that, it sounds a lot like what you've been doing during your Backstage Lockdown Club, the live stream performances that you've been doing through Patreon. And I have to say that looks like it's been a great success for both you and the audience.
Well, it's kept me connected. When I got back I was in New Zealand when we heard about the pandemic, although no one knew what it was. So it was all very spurious information we were getting. I was touring there, and the day I left New Zealand to get to Australia, New Zealand closed its doors. That was a year ago in March. So they were way ahead of everyone. Managed to get around most of Australia as it was slowly closing down around us. And then the big worry was getting back home. So when we got home, I realized that this wasn't going away in a month or two. And I started thinking about what I could possibly do. This is going to last 6 months. I can't do 6 months of not performing. I've always performed, since I was 18. I've always been touring. And I saw that a lot of artists were doing stuff on their laptops, performing and hooking up with people. And I delved into the world of technology again and found the right cameras and the little vision mixer and stuff that I've got here that I do all my stuff on, a way of using proper, compressed microphones for vocals. And so a way of making it look and sound quality. And I've done that for a year now. It's just over a year that the Backstage Lockdown Club has been going. And it's kept me connected with people all around the world. People from Japan joining, and Australia, and Tasmania. It's fabulous. So it's kept me sane.
I've caught about half of them, I think, myself, and they're great. When you broadcast, it's usually about 2:30 or 3:30 here in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And, perfect time for me to turn you on in the afternoon and have a midday pick-me-up. But
well, it's great. I mean, I know it doesn't work for everyone, and for some reason, everyone wants to be on it live. They want to see it performed live, even though they have the facility to watch it the next day or watch it the next month or whatever. But there's something about that connection where people come in and they all kind of chat to each other online before the concert kicks off. So I can sit here making sure that everything's working and doing my thing before going live, and I can see all the interaction with people, and that's fantastic. It kind of takes it back to how your website used to be when it started out, before Twitter and Facebook and all of that stuff. When people used to get there and connect and feel as though they know each other, which is fabulous.
Yeah, I was surprised that once you resumed performing live, that you continued the live stream, even though you had gone back to doing festivals or shows or whatever? Will you continue to do it when you get back from the United States?
I think I will, and it's because it's become, for a lot of people, a bit of a lifeline. They really look forward to it because they still don't go out. You know, there's a lot of people, certain age group, certain demographic, who still don't feel safe with the idea of going out into a big crowd of people. And I've seen that. I've seen that kind of reflect on initial ticket sales. You know, not just here in the UK for the next tour, but you know, everywhere I go. You know, even in America, people are saying, "Okay, well, I'll wait until he's actually here." You know, I'll wait until he's definitely in the country, and I'll wait until I've seen one of the shows has been posted up on the internet, or whatever, and I know it's actually happening. Because understandably, people have been desperate to see things and they bought tickets for things that have been cancelled or postponed or whatever. And that's frustrating for all of us. And it casts a kind of a semi-negative pall over the, you know, over the whole idea of going to see someone. But there's enough people out there who desperately want this and need it. And I certainly desperately want this. I want to go out and do this. So so I'm hoping that people will see that that it's not just this. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be both, as long as I'm still interested in doing it.
Great. You know, one of the things that I think is notable about the Backstage Lockdown Club is your guests. And I think this speaks a lot to who you are and how this distinguishes you as a professional, because you've got such a strong collection of friends in the music business. And, you know, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on why those friendships sustain and maintain themselves in such a way. I think it's partly because like you are so willing to pitch in and help out people. Like, you know, you are happy to be the front man, but you're also happy to like play guitar or write some lyrics or just show up for folks. And I think like, you know, over the course of your career, that's stuck in people's memories and you have these great friendships as a result. And I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that observation.
Well, that's a lovely thought. I'd like to think we don't do it just because I bully them into it. I think there's a respect amongst, you know, people from my genre, because I still think the period that kind of peaked with the success was a period of songwriting. So irrespective of what music you were into in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, certainly, they were all really well crafted songs, you know, whether it be Wham or whether it be Tears for Fears or whether it be, you know, ABC or Heaven 17, you know, they all wrote really good songs and songs were king. And I think there's a respect among songwriters in that respect. So I've been very fortunate that everyone I've asked to do it, you know, if you've got the time to come and do it, I've just kind of jumped at the chance. And there's a reciprocal thing as well, of course, as you quite rightly point out. I'm a musician, you know, I'd be playing in a pub if I wasn't, you know, a successful musician. I'd be sitting jamming away with someone else's band, because that's what you do. You know, it's not all about the kudos and the stardom and where you see yourself in the hierarchy of, you know, famous musicians. If that were the case, I wouldn't be anywhere. You know, I love music. I love the performance. I love picking up the guitar and doing my thing. And hopefully that never goes away. And also, I suppose we're part of maybe the first generation of, you know, popular pop stroke rock music, to be able to grow old doing this. You know, prior to you know, the Stones and the Who and whatever, it was always deemed a 5-minute career. You know, you were in this, you'd do it for 5 years or whatever, and then you'd get on with a proper job. But now, just like classical musicians or jazz musicians or folk musicians, you can carry on until you fall off the end of the stage. And there's an audience there for that. There's an audience who want that, who still go and see someone and get a buzz from seeing someone who's been doing this for a long time, because skills come with that passage of time. And that's a fabulous thing. It's something that none of us ever thought would happen. But we're all kind of benefiting from that now. The fact that your music that is still relevant, still being played, it's still out there on the internet, it's still out there on specific radio stations, and people still want to see live music that you perform. That's great.
Your guests on Backstage Lockdown Club made me hungry for some of their material, to be honest with you as well, because like you kind of broke some news there. I thought on occasion. I'm a big fan of Altered Images, so the fact that you had Claire Cogan and her saying that there was going to be a new Altered Images album, that was the first time I'd heard that news. And then you were talking to Glenn Gregory about his side project Outside of Heaven 17. You know, that was fantastic stuff. And I was wondering if any of that, you know, if you had a particularly memorable guest that you particularly enjoyed talking to yourself.
You know what, a lot of them are friends, and it's usually the ones that you're most relaxed with. You know, men are funny creatures. You know, we never pick up the phone and talk to each other. We go for years without having a conversation, but the moment you have a conversation, you're straight back to where you were all those years ago, and you just pick up from that point. So speaking to someone like you know, Mark King from Level 42, it's just an absolute joy. He's just funny, and he's witty, and he's fast, and he's a lovely rapport. Glenn Gregory is exactly the same. You know, we've been friends for a long, long time, and it's almost as if the cameras aren't there. It's almost as if it's not for anything other than us just catching up. And I think that comes across. It's not me interviewing people; it's me talking to people, and that's a whole different ballgame. I don't sit with a list of questions and tick them off. You know, while they're answering, they're looking at the top of my head. You know, we're chatting, we're having a conversation, and that makes a big difference, I think, to people, because they not only get to see me with my guard down. I'm not behind a microphone in a spotlight with fabulous lights all around me. It's just me sitting in a room having a chat, and that realness kind of comes across. And maybe that's the appeal that works for the audience, and certainly works for the guests.
Great. I love it. You know, we were talking about the 80s and, you know, how there was great songcraft and everything going on at that time. And I recently became aware that you are publishing a book about your photos, containing your photos from largely the 80s, I imagine. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about this photo book that you have planned.
When I joined Ultravox at first, I'd never held a 35mm camera, a proper camera, and Billy and Warren and Chris in the band both had good quality 35mm cameras, and in moments of, you know, boredom, I would pick these things up and look through the lens, and life looked so much better through a camera. I have to say, it was like looking at a movie, but it was real life. And I just became fascinated with it and bought a camera. And also, Ultravox are quite a guarded band. We never traveled with journalists, and we never traveled with photographers unless it was specifically for an article. You know, Anton Corbin was one of the photographers that we actually let in the back door. We'd let him into a little circle because we all loved these photographs. So we were very mistrusting of the British music press. So we took the photographs that they never got a chance to take. So all the, you know, letting the guard down, all the stupid stuff that you do backstage, all the seeing that we're actually humans, we're not just four technicians behind banks of electronics making, you know, po-faced, sucked in cheap music. You know, we were actually human. And we managed to get all of those lovely shots where photographers weren't allowed. And I had absolute disregard for these photographs. I left them all out in outbuildings, and they all got wet and damaged, and the negatives got ruined and scratched and whatever. And then a few years ago, lovely people who run the Ultravox fan site took all these photographs and rescanned them. And I saw them again for the first time in years, and I just thought, there's something wonderful about them. Not that I'm a great photographer, but there's something wonderful about the moments that they captured and the moments that have gone. Because you're looking, it's like a time machine. You're looking back at moments that will never be relived because the technology has changed. You know, I've seen pictures of Chris with his first Walkman on, and the headphones look so ridiculous. You know, or a photograph from Warren's drum position, looking out behind the keyboards at a sound check in a venue in Japan, and seeing how basic the electronics were and how we managed to make the noise that we did with the stuff we had. It's just little fabulous bits. And so I just thought there's something here that you know, that just documents that heady 5 or 6 years of Ultravox that's worth putting together.
Great. I am fascinated. That book's coming out in November, I understand?
Yeah, it should be November, yeah.
I am fascinated to see that. That is going to be fantastic. You know, I have to ask if you have any pictures of, you know, I think a press release or something I read referenced your visit to Connie Plank's studio when you guys were there with Ultravox. And, yep. You know, I saw the documentary recently on Amazon Prime where, you know, Connie's son came and visited you. But it blew my mind to learn that you and the Eurythmics were basically there at the same time because so much good music in such a small spot just seems like it's impossible.
Well, that was Connie Plank was the magnet. He was the guy who everyone went to. You went to Connie, he didn't come to you. So yeah, anyone who had interesting ideas wanted to work with Connie Plank. And yeah, there are lots of photographs of sitting in that studio, which doesn't look like a studio, it's a barn with a bunch of equipment in it. And Connie's very much, in those days, it was a kind of German hippie. So it's got lots of kind of hippie-esque things hanging off the ceiling, and none of it mattered. You know, it was all about sitting around this little desk and watching Connie create audio magic, you know, just create atmospheres with the little boxes he had around him, these little intricate things that he built that made noises like nobody else could. It was wonderful.
It's mind-boggling today to think of that level of experimentation for a big commercial release. Like, it just blows my mind.
Well, you've got to remember where Connie came from. You know, he worked in radio as an engineer, and he worked on you know, Kraftwerk's Autobahn, which was like 1972 or 73 or something. So he was experimenting with sound way back then. Commercial success was never on Connie's radar at all, and it wasn't on ours. You know, we were trying to make interesting music. You know, otherwise we'd never have written a 6.5 minute long instrumental as the first track on Vienna, or even written Vienna, which would never have been played on radio, you know, or should never have been played on radio. Luckily it was. So yeah, we were looking for a different kind of success.
I do want to say how much I love this special edition, by the way, since you
Oh,
referenced
great, thank you. They've done a beautiful job on the repackaging and the remixing and stuff.
Beautiful work indeed. Yeah. You know, I wanted to ask a little bit about the albums you're working on in the future before you go. You know, I hear that you're working on 3 different things. One sort of a traditional studio album, 2 a sequel to the orchestrated album, and 3 another instrumental record.
Well, yes. Well, this will be my first full instrumental album. As you probably know, I've always, just about every album I've made has had an instrumental of some description on there, but I've never sat down and thought I'm going to do an entire piece of work without any vocals. And it's been a weird process. It's been an interesting process, because normally you start writing a song because you've got an idea what you want the song to be about. Then you later down the line, once you've got a sound bed for it, you start sculpting the lyrics and the phrasing and whatever, and turn the seed into a song. Well, I started without the seed. I started with I'm going to write a piece of music that would suit, you know, a movie that creates an atmosphere in its own right, that anyone anywhere on the planet can listen to and decide for themselves what the story is. Whereas film soundtrack people, they already have a script, they already have a story, they already have images, they already have an atmosphere, and they have to enhance whatever the director wants. Well, this is the opposite. This is me making the soundtrack, and I'd love to send it out there when it's ready, when it's about to be released, and have people create their own videos to these soundtrack pieces, because they do that already. They do it on YouTube. They take old Ultravox tunes or solo material or whatever, and then they cut together images that they see in their head when the music creates those images for them, and then put them on YouTube. And I'd love to do something like that. So there's a bunch of there's a bunch of material there that people can explore and start putting their own little videos to. So that's been great fun. We haven't gotten very far with the orchestrated album because lockdown has stopped us from being together. That's Ty Unwin, the orchestrator and producer that I worked with on the orchestrated album. So we just haven't been in the same room. We've been doing stuff via Zoom, and it's not quite as easy. It's not quite as malleable as being able to sit in the room and throw ideas together and sit around a keyboard and whatever. And the other album, the main album, of course, that's the one that's always on the boil. It's always there. The moment you finish an album and you start working on new material, that's there. It just takes as long as it takes to get round to finishing it. But it's really shaped up well. I'm loving a lot of the stuff that we've got on that record so far.
I have to ask, Fragile was a very introspective album, and I always thought of you as a musician who writes songs because you have something to say. And Fragile, I think, certainly has a lot to say. So it's fascinating to me that you're trying this instrumental album, because that seems to me, that must be a completely different headspace, right? Like, what are you saying when you make an instrumental album? And then I'm wondering similarly, like, if the next studio album will be equally introspective or something a little different.
Well, the main album is songs. Songs to me have always been a diary. I don't sit and write journals, but I write songs, and I write songs about real subjects. I don't sit and create scenarios. I maybe did when I was starting out. You invent a scenario and therefore that's a song. I write about real life. I write about what affects me and what I find interesting and what I find petrifying in life at that moment in time. And that's what this album is. The seed of the idea, even though they might not be complete, is absolutely true to that moment in time when I came up with the idea. So they're still relevant. It's not like I'm writing something that by the time it's finished, it's dated, because it's never finished until you draw a line under it. You're constantly altering things. It's malleable. It's like clay. You constantly pull bits off and put new bits to it and change it. And you start off with a Fabergé egg and you end up with a warehouse. That's just the way it works. So that album is exactly that. It'll be the continuation of Fragile. It might not sound anything like Fragile, but the concept will be the same. It's me writing about my life and what affects me. The orchestrated album, of course, is just, it's the revelation that when we chose the songs we were going to do for orchestrated, we could have chosen any song to do for orchestrated, because they will all make the transition, just simply because of the nature of how I write and how they feel. They're either immensely atmospheric and haunting, or the big and grandiose and totally over the top. And that suits the orchestra. The orchestra seems to have been able to do that, from doing, a very haunting lament all the way through to this totally over the top hymn, this rousing, killer, big, bombastic thing. And that encapsulates everything that Ultravox were and seems to be everything that I am.
That's great. Any chance of hearing anything new on the tour? Das Beat, for example, like anything?
I tried it. I tried it last week on the last BLC, and it was fun to do. I have to say, I was a bit petrified of doing it, but I really enjoyed it. So if there's a desire for it to be performed, I will do it, because there's something about the chorus that's just hideously infectious, and because even though I called it band electronica featuring blah blah blah, and it is a very electronic, an uberly electronic track, it really made the transition to the acoustic guitar. There's a good song hopefully still stands up, and it seemed to be able to do that. So yeah, I might take that out for a run.
Well, if no one asks for it at City Winery, I will, if no one else does. So.
All right, okay, you've got it.
Fantastic. One last question for you, Midge. Like, I saw you 7, 8 years ago when you came to Philadelphia and you said, "Hey, I'm in Philadelphia for the first time since Live Aid," and you went on to say, like, I fell off of touring the United States for a little bit, but I vow I'm going to come back regularly now. And you've kept your word. You're coming back regularly. And I just kind of wondering, like, that's a great commitment, I think. And it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I love hearing you, love seeing you. Other people do too, obviously. You sold out last time you were here at City Winery in Washington, D.C. What do you get out of the commitment? I'm wondering, like, how's it been for you to keep coming back every 18 months to 2 years? Like,
I think it's only fair that I come back in some form or other. You've got to understand that growing up in the UK, irrespective of how successful you are anywhere with whatever you do, it's certainly in the music industry, America was always the big flagship. Oh, you've got number one in America, you've got this in America, you've got that in America. And for a whole variety of reasons, Ultravox just didn't do that. And I didn't do that. We'll forever be, underground artists, will forever be, alternative music. And there's something in the back of the mind that says, well, as futile as it might feel, you think, well, I'm still not done with America yet. I'm 68. I don't know who I'm kidding. I'm not going to crack America tomorrow or next year or the year after. But there's something about the idea that it never happened. So therefore, I am going to commit to being out there, especially after that 20-year hiatus, when you don't have a major label. There's no requirement for you to go out there. You lose all contact with agents and whatever. And people are constantly asking in America, why did they not get the band gigs? And it's because no one's going to commit to it. No one will commit to, bringing a band out to do a handful of shows. And I can understand why. I totally get it. But in the meantime, until we get that commitment from someone, I will be there every 18 months to 2 years, which is precisely what I said to you I would do.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you again. And thanks for your time, Midge. Always love chatting with you. Such a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. And I hope to see you at the winery.
You will.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Sure. Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.